and population, but sometimes you could use ecology or sustainable development, resources, right? I don't know which is the most general topic. There is some confusion over which is more general than others, right? There is no clear-cut distinction between energy and resources. And environment, resources, I don't know, population, if you include even population, maybe sustainable development must be most general title that includes all these issues in it. Or maybe ecology, sustainable development or ecology. So if you use these terms, every one of these issues must be included, right? But this book uses environment and population. Now, this chapter begins with a section on interdependence and environment, meaning that environmental issues become more sharper, intense as global economy gets more interdependent, right? Which is an interesting question. But the way he describes it, I mean, the first sentence here, global threats to the natural environment are a growing source of interdependence. Let's think about this sentence. In other words, natural environment. The environment is being under threat, right? Has been under threat, right? But as we become more interdependent, that threat is becoming more serious. I think that's what he means here, right? But the question is, what are these threats to the environment, right? Who are making these threats to the environment, right? And clearly, he doesn't go so far as to argue, does globalization, the famous term, globalization, interdependence, globalization, they are connected, right? Interdependence, globalization, countries, they breaking down barriers, right? Borders. That's interdependence, right? That's globalization. So what he's asking here is that what is the impact of globalization or interdependence on the environment? That's another way of putting his question. What's the impact of globalization and interdependence on the environment? Is it good or is it worse, right? As we get more and more interdependent, more and more globalized, then what's happening to the environment? Right? This is the first question he's asking. What are you going to do with the environment as the global economy expands? And as the global economy expands, we consume more, right? Trade expands, right? Finance expands. It's a good thing, right? Then economies grow, right? And wealth created, new wealth created. These are all good things, right? These are positive aspects of globalization. But if you look at it from the environmental perspective, you need to rethink globalization. I think that's the intention of this first sentence. You need to look at economic growth and the globalization and interdependence from the environmental perspective. Let's look at globalization from the environmental perspective. That's how he begins this chapter, right? Which is a good question. economic growth, globalization, free trade, right, or free finance. Let's look at it from the environmental perspective. Right? What's the implication of this from environmental perspective, or ecological perspective, or sustainable development perspective? Right? We need to rethink economic growth, globalization, interdependence. And looks like he's having a little bit of a negative view, right? Because he thinks that there are threats to the environment, right? And these threats are becoming more serious as we get more interdependent. So he's having a little bit of a negative perspective on the impact of globalization on the environment. There are positive, negative views. It's divided. The views are divided. But he's taking a little bit of negative perspective, my impression. Because states' actions regarding pollution, conservation, natural resources, which comprises environment, right? These individual states' actions are having a direct ramifications for neighboring countries, right? That's interdependence. Because these effects tend to be diffuse. Spread, meaning spread from one location to another, right? Very easily. So he's describing the problem, environmental problem first, right? Environmental problem first. Environmental problems today, right? Tend to be diffuse, easy to spread from one country to another, right? So, given these nature of problems, since we are studying international politics, he's asking the next question. The next question he's asking is just this. In other words, we studied global trade. We studied global finance. We studied wars, international organizations, international law. On these different topics, the key question, in all these different topics, the key question was, right, how and under what circumstances cooperation occurs, right? When and how states can cooperate, right? Either on trade, finance, but we learned that cooperation, international cooperation, is very difficult, right? Very difficult. International cooperation is very difficult because there is no world government, right? Anarchy, the nature of international politics, right? Then there were two divided views, realists, liberals, right? All these familiar things. But here, interestingly, what makes environmental issues, or energy, or population, or ecological issues, what makes environmental issues most difficult to derive cooperation? Here, the first paragraph, the last sentence, you need to pay a lot of attention to this. I mentioned all this, right? We cover that here. Because of these natures, like any other international issue, trade issue, financial issue, right? Environmental issue is also collective goods problem. Collective goods problem. We'll define that. Okay, what do we mean by collective goods? But first, environmental issues also collective goods issue. Because of that, but environmental collective goods problem most difficult, right? Here, particularly in areas such as the environment, natural resources, and population. Most difficult. Collective nature is most intensely and manifests itself strongly on environmental issues. We need to think about this. Why, particularly environmental issues? Right? Why? What makes environmental issues most difficult? Right? Here, let me repeat. A sustainable natural environment is a collective good. Okay? Sustainable natural environment is a collective good. To protect the environment in a sustainable manner, okay, is a collective good. Here, let me ask some questions. And I think to answer these questions, we need to take some example, okay? Example, like where could we find these problems, okay? Real life examples. Then we'll get to, then how do we get around this collective goods problem? How could we resolve this collective goods problem? Is there any way we could derive cooperation on environmental issues? What should be done, okay, to derive cooperation? States' cooperation on environmental issues, right? Then again, we'll get to some questions of, one of the, coping methods is international organizations, regimes, right? Building regimes, right? Governance mechanism, okay? Questions? 심영현, yes. Can you define collective goods problem? What is collective goods problem? We covered this actually a couple of times in previous chapters, but in the context of environmental issues, right? What is collective goods problem? In your neighboring countries, right, is your own problems. Has a direct impact on you, right? Okay. Like the example she took, Chinese desert problem, desertification problem, okay? Okay, it's a good example. Good example. Okay, because when China lose arable land, right? Then neighboring countries such as Korea, maybe even Japan, we suffer because of these yellow dust, right? Yellow dust arise in China, then flow here, right? Because China doesn't have trees, right? China loses trees, right? So then we have yellow dust problem, right? So we have to take care of this Chinese problem. Chinese problem is not simply Chinese problem, it's also our problem. Okay? So is it collective goods problem? Is it collective goods problem? Collective goods problem. Okay, collective goods problem. Okay. Second aspect. What was the second aspect?
Natural environment
Takes time to improve. In other words, long-term solution. So you are repeating this, reading the text here, right? Environmental effects tend to be diffuse, right? Then second, long-term effects, right? Effects tends to be first diffuse, right? Then second, long-term. Takes time to recover. Okay. Takes time to recover. Good point, but I'm not sure whether 100% that makes collective goods problem. Because the textbook definition here, those are good points, but not 100%. Not 100%. It's related. The first point you made, diffusion problem, the first problem, I think is it emphasizes that probably you can live without trading, right? As a country, you can live without trading, okay? You can build barriers to foreign products, okay? You can live, I mean, for several years or even decades, okay, under the protected system. But you cannot leave, okay, when China sends this yellow dust. That's, I think, the diffusion problem, right? The difference between trade problem and environmental problem, right? So this, I think, makes environmental issues much more intense in terms of collective goods problem. When your neighbors make troubles, okay, you have a direct effect from your neighbors. That's the difference of environmental problems. The difference between trade problem, environmental problem. Difference between environmental problem, financial problem, right? You can't cut yourself 100% from this environmental impact, right? Trade impact, you can protect, but environmental impact, limits to the protection, right? Let me direct you to the definition this textbook gives. Page 392. Page 392. Because he makes reference to these collective goods so many times. He's obsessed. This author, he's obsessed with this notion of collective goods. So it's worthwhile to read clearly his definition first. Here, page 392, third paragraph, last sentence. This is the exact definition he gives about the collective goods problem. Benefits are shared globally. but costs must be extracted from each state individually. This is the exact definition he gives about collective goods problem. May not be clear enough to you. What does this mean? What does this mean? Benefits are globally shared, but costs must be extracted from each state individually. Here, the key to understanding collective goods from this definition is that who enjoys benefits, right? The key to the collective goods is that who enjoys benefits, okay, and who pays for the cost. This is key, right? Collective goods occur when there's a discrepancy between those who enjoy benefits and those who pay for the cost. That's when exactly when collective goods problem occurs. 100%. Your point partially, yes, correct. But this is real definition of collective goods. Now, get back to 387, the first page. Let's take some examples of like an environmental problem. He takes the fishery issue here, right? Fishery issue here. Again, he says that again, fishery issue is a collective goods problem, collective goods issue, because major fisheries in international waters not owned by any state. Okay, they are a collective good. Okay. Now, 원창. What's the state of fishing industry today? Yeah, state of fishing industry. Is it, what's the problem with the fishing industry? You need time? Okay, 오현정. Yes, what's the problem with fishing industry here? Fishing industry, right, they provide food, right? Yes, sushi and everything, right? So they are abusing the waters. They are abusing the waters. They are abusing the fishing population, right? So that the number of fish in the waters are declining dramatically. That's the problem, right? Number of fish declines dramatically. So the graph, the figure here. Let's look at the figure. Yes, here. This graph shows, this figure shows, how drastically the fishing population is expected to decline over time, right? So by 2050, unless something done, right, you have no fish left. Almost, right? I think it's a serious problem, particularly for those who like sushi, right? You have to eat only meat, right? So something must be done. Something must be done. But this is a collective good problem because, you know, states, they, you know, give out subsidies to fishing industry, right? So they grow this fishing industry as a state industry, right? So states as a whole, they have to convene to make a decision on reducing, right, the fishing boat. The fishing boat. The states have to make a decision on that. But which is difficult. So billions and billions of dollars are given to fishing industry still as subsidies. Again, it's a difficult decision because there is no world government to make a decision on this, right? For the first time in 1999, so because of this nature, we need multilateral institutions, right? Organized by the United Nations. Like I said, international institution is important, right? Norm is important, right? Norm is important and institution is important. In terms of institution regarding fisheries, there was a meeting sponsored by the UN in 1999, right? So participating nations, they decided to cap the size of fishing fleets, right? And at the same time, reducing subsidies. There was some agreement, but again, the agreement is voluntary, right? So implementation is very slow. Like in any other international agreement, like in any other international issues. And he takes the example of the tragedy of commons, right, from history, the tragedy of commons. 우동균? What's the tragedy of commons? When the tragedy of the commons occur, what's the best way of like getting around the collective goods problems in this context from British history? So in the tragedy of commons centuries ago, when these commons were shared, right? And it was overgrazed, right? So the solution was to split, right? Split the commons so that each individual can take some responsibility for their own section. This is solution, okay? Which is good solution. And if not this, another solution is like I said, regimes and institutions, right? The next paragraph, regimes and institutions. Reciprocity, right? Reciprocity. Again, important thing is who enjoys the benefits and who pays for the cost. We need some rules about this issue, right? So international organization is important in this respect. International organization is important. And the next paragraph here, there's a new terminology here. On international environmental issues, in particular, he emphasizes the importance of the community of experts. The community of experts, which is called knowledge-based communities, epistemic communities. In other words, scholars, experts, right? NGOs, I mean, those should be coming out, right? And study, analyze these seemingly professional issues, such as environmental issues, then promote it, okay, to society. This is important on environmental issues. So these are knowledge-based communities. To form knowledge-based communities is important to resolve environmental problems. Now, so far this is repetition of what we have learned so far, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about then a little bit of history of environmental related international organizations, right? Like what kinds of conferences or what kind of international organizations we have today regarding environmental, energy, and population, these issues. Organized by probably the UN or sometimes famous global leaders, right? Do you know when we were like awakened to the importance of these environmental issues in history? Not in 1930, 1940, right? Right? Not in 1920, right? These environmental issues. Trade issues, yes, trade issues are long-standing issue. It was raised. We learned about the importance of global trade, global finance, long, long time ago. But we learned about the importance of these environmental issues or energy issues or population issues relatively recent. Kyoto Protocol in the 1990s, right? But when was the first time we were awakened to the importance of environmental issues or ecological issues? Do you know when was the heyday of environmental movements, global environmental movements? When was the heyday? When were the heydays of global environmental movements? Do you know? Before the 1970s, societies were just thinking that economic growth is permanent. Economic growth is permanent, unlimited. That was kind of thinking before the 1970s. Economic growth, as long as you put resources into the economy, then economic growth goes on. Permanent. But 70s, we had a second thought on this. There is a limit. There is a limit to economic growth. Okay? And we begin to think that population could also be a threat Like for instance, currently there are 6.6 billion people living on the earth. Currently 6.6 billion people, right? Then by 2050, 3 billion more added to the current population, right? We think that is the earth as a system. I mean, can the earth sustain this number, almost 10 billion people? This is kind of new thinking. That began in the 70s, right? The system itself, or food problem, just mathematical problem here. Number of people, 10 billion, then could we have enough food to feed this number of people, right? More recent problem is energy we use can also be a threat to the environment. Like coal, most popular type of energy, coal. It didn't pose any problem before the 1970s, right? The more coal you use to grow the economy, better, right? As long as you grow your economy, however much coal you use, doesn't matter. But after 70s, coal, right, is a problem because it emits, harmful materials. This is scientific discovery, right? So, to solve this problem, we need to develop better energy, clean energy, right? Then what is cleaner than coal? Coal or oil, right? Same thing. Oil is better than coal, but what is cleaner than oil and coal? That's the kind of problem we're having. Right? What is cleaner than coal and oil? Then we need to, then technologies come in here, technologies, right? To sustain the current rate of economic growth, we need to develop better technology, right? To use cleaner energy, like for instance, natural gas. Natural gas. We are living in the age of natural gas. Natural gas is cleaner than oil and coal. Nuclear energy, cleaner than natural gas. Renewable energy, cleaner than nuclear energy, right? I don't know what comes after renewable energy, but at least natural gas, atomic energy, nuclear energy, then renewable energy. These are three future, right, generation energy, much cleaner than oil and coal. So the 70s, that's 70s, okay, 1970s. Most famous conference on the environment took place in 1972. What was the meeting? What was the name of the meeting? The Stockholm Conference, 1972. The Stockholm Conference in 1972. The first meeting on the environment in history. But I want to remind you, the Stockholm Conference, very famous meeting, right? Very famous meeting. But the Stockholm Conference was not organized by the UN. It was not UN conference. Okay? It was organized by Canada's Prime Minister at that time. It was not organized by the United Nations. And not many leaders, state leaders, participated in that meeting. Okay? That's Stockholm Conference. Stockholm Conference did signal a growing concern among governments. So the most important outcome of this conference was the founding of UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, was created in 1973. UNEP was created. This is not in the textbook. This is not in the textbook. UN Environmental Program, UNEP, was created after the Stockholm Conference, 1973. It was launched 1973. UNEP is located, the headquarters is located in Nairobi, Kenya. Okay, so if you study, if you become an expert on global environmental issues, then you are recruited by the UNEP, then you have to go to Kenya. I know some people. Famous scientist from US research school, then he was posted Nairobi, then his sons and daughters are studying in the US for their whole life. They live separate. Very difficult life, but that's because UNEP is located in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. That was created in 1973 after the Stockholm Conference. Now, second important conference, not quite conference, but important meeting about the environment. 72 was, right, the Stockholm Conference. Then the awareness began to rise about this issue. Then there was the World Commission on Environment and Development. The World Commission on Environment and Development was launched, right? This was, just a second, 1985. 1985. Okay? This is commonly known as the Brundtland Commission. Brundtland Commission. Brundtland. Brundtland Commission. Chaired by Brundtland, Mr. Brundtland, Prime Minister of Norway. Prime Minister of Norway at that time. This Brundtland Commission was an important meeting because their report was so famous, their report. Brundtland Commission, they issued the famous report, Our Common Future. Our Common Future, famous report. And Brundtland report and Brundtland Commission facilitated several important negotiations over particularly ozone depletion issues that led to the Montreal Protocol on ozone depletion. All this came in the 1980s, right? All this came in the 1980s. Remember, global negotiations on different types of environmental issues like global warming, ozone depletion, biodiversity, right? These different environmental issues, most successful one. What is the most successful one? Global negotiations on ozone depletion is the most successful negotiation so far. And Brundtland Commission facilitated these ozone depletion negotiations. Then comes Rio Summit. Rio Summit, 1992. Rio de Janeiro. Rio Summit, 1992. Rio Summit is the first UN conference on the environment, right? This Rio Summit is also known as the Earth Summit, the Earth Summit. Again, it was held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, right? The first UN organized conference. And again, this textbook, our textbook says more than 100 state leaders participated in this meeting, right? More than 100 leaders, different leaders participated in this most important environmental conference in history. That is the Earth Summit and Rio Summit. Take a 5-minute break, come back. The dilemma facing the Earth is that how do we grow under environmental limits? Right? This is a dilemma, so that most of the conferences go under the title of environment and development. And hence, sustainable development, the concept of sustainable development. This is the definition. Economic growth, okay, that does not deplete resources and destroy ecosystems. Okay, this is sustainable development. Very tricky term. How do we grow without damaging the environment? Right? How do we use energy in a way that protects the environment? This is the dilemma. Right? To grow, we need energy, right? Energy is the most important input. We need energy, but energy, one way or another, is harmful to the environment. Particularly coal is harmful, very, very much so. Oil is harmful, right? But the way we developed over the last 100 years, we indiscriminately used oil and coal, right? And probably we might be addicted to oil. Our economies are addicted to oil, if not coal. So we have to grow out of oil, right? And continue to grow at the same time. That's the dilemma. And technologies are still limited, right? And we are using more and more natural gas, but natural gas is not universal. It's not as widespread as oil. That's the problem. Natural gas is still expensive. Nuclear energy is, in terms of technology, still dangerous, risky. Renewable energy, still not commercial, still very much expensive, right? So this is a problem. It's a technological problem. Now, global warming. Global warming. Again, global warming is a collective good problem. It's a collective goods problem. In other words, again, benefits, right? Those who enjoy benefits and those who pay for the cost, different regarding global warming. Global warming, benefits are probably globally shared, but who pays for the cost of global warming mostly? Global warming is a collective goods problem, right? Because there's a discrepancy between benefits and costs, right? Again, following the definition of this textbook, benefits are globally shared. But costs are paid much more by the poor, developing, global south countries. Okay? About global warming. That's the discrepancy. That's the collective goods problem. Now, first, global warming, some scientific side. Again, global warming literally means that temperature is rising, right? Global temperature is rising. And how much? Global temperatures may rise by between 3 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Over the next decades, global temperatures may rise by between 3 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit. How serious is this? This is the difference between today's global climate and that of the last ice age. Okay? There is a scientific debate on whether or not temperatures are really rising. There's a scientific debate, okay? But all the, symptoms of global warming we witness today almost prove that this is a fact, okay? But we need more scientific evidence about this, okay? Do you know who does this scientific work? There's a group of scientists who prove these, global warming, global temperatures. This group of scientists is called IPCC. Group of scientists who work on this scientific work. IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is a group of scientists. Again, this is knowledge-based community. Why knowledge-based community is important about environmental issues? This is an example. Who are monitoring global temperatures movement? UNEP, Kenya, they are monitoring global temperatures. United Nations Environmental Program, along with World Meteorological Organization, WMO. They monitor the movement of global temperatures. And IPCC, as a group of scientists, they prove, okay? They make a decision. This is knowledge-based communities on global warming. They play a key role. Now, so this is global warming, Okay, temperatures rise, and these are groups of scientists, right? Then there's a international organization, UNEP, WMO, right? Now, what's the reason behind global warming? Let's talk about that. Reason behind global warming. Let me ask questions. 이병철. Yes. What are the reasons behind global warming? Can you speak up, please?
There are many industries that emit greenhouse gases that can damage the ozone layer, and because of that, the ozone layer gets destructed, and the sun rays penetrates the outer layer of the Earth without any destruction. So it's like it basically speeds up the air
Right.
at a faster rate than it usually
Right.
would.
Right. Warming itself is caused by, you're right, some gases, right? Some gases trapped in the atmosphere. And these gases, there are several kinds of gases. There are several kinds of gases that heat up, the globe, the temperature. These gases are called, in general, greenhouse gases, right? Greenhouse gases. There are several kinds. And this textbook gives 4. The most important kind of gas is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. That's the most important. CO2, carbon dioxide. Lion's share of the global warming. Carbon dioxide. Then, when carbon dioxide is emitted, how is carbon dioxide produced? Cars, maybe when you burn something, right? Factories, all over the places. Carbon dioxide is made all over the places, right? Burning, heating, right? Driving, everything. Mostly industrial activities. Industrial activities generate carbon dioxide, CO2. So CO2 equals industrial production, right? Industrial production. Second, methane. Methane gas. This is an interesting one. What is methane gas? Methane. Methane, here, greenhouse gases. It's greenhouse gases because these gases go up and they are trapped in the atmosphere, right? In the atmosphere. Then when they are trapped, they sort of heat up the air, right? So that temperatures go up because of these gases. These gases don't evaporate. They are trapped somewhere, right? So that it works like greenhouse. So the temperatures heat up here, inside, right? So most important one is carbon dioxide. Second most important one, methane. What is methane? What is methane? When is methane produced? Right, cattle. Right, cattle, animals. Right, we learned that, we read sometimes from newspapers that they make it, they make methane. More than we expected, these cattle, right? Cattle and animals, they're responsible. But we have other sources of methane. methane gas. Methane is same as natural gas. Natural gas, more than 90% of natural gas is methane. Methane. So when we use natural gas, when we produce, explore, when we extract natural gas, then methane comes out of it. That's another reason, methane. And we have more and more methane, okay? Fugitive methanes from methane production, natural gas production. Okay, so besides these animals, we have natural gas extraction emits methane gas. Okay, so it is a global problem that natural gas companies, they extract natural gas in a way that they don't lose methane from natural gas extraction. That's a global issue today because there are so many natural gas fields, okay, globally. So it's important these global gas companies, they produce natural gas in a way that they don't lose methane. Right? So methane from natural gas production, this is important. And CFC, chlorofluorocarbons, CFC, right? CFC, I think CFC, they work in both ways. In other words, CFCs heat up the temperature, but at the same time, they make a hole in the ozone layer. So CFC, they both, right? Warming, ozone depletion, both. And finally, nitrous oxide, nitrous oxide. That's another greenhouse. When is nitrous oxide produced? I don't know. Find out about it. So these are greenhouse gases. Then outcomes. What are the outcomes of global warming? So global temperatures go up, then what? Then what we have because of global warming? When global temperatures go up, then what real problems we have? Do you have any problem because of these, temperatures going up? Yes, we have problems. Number one problem is we have global warming. Number one problem is global warming. Because of this, we have weather pattern changes. Weather pattern changes. Now, famous New York Times columnist Tom Friedman, he called these weather pattern changes due to global warming, he called it global weirding. Global weirding. Global weather is simply very much weird. We can't predict. Because sometimes weather, the freezing, sometimes, too hot, right? Weirding. Simply weathers are becoming very much weird. That's global, not simply global warming, but global weirding, according to Tom Friedman. Which is right? Sometimes become too much hot, sometimes because too cold, right? So these are weather pattern changes. So that you have droughts, and some regions suffer drought, and others, floods, right? These are weirding, right? Droughts and floods and freezes, right? This is one. So that probably because of this, agricultural patterns may be, may be changing also, right? Agricultural crops might change due to this. And sea level rises, right? This is a very famous one. Sea level rises, right? If you watch the movie The Day After, right? That was released some years ago already. If you watch that movie, the movie is very famous. I mean, very interesting because usually in this kind of disaster movies, right? People who suffer are mostly in poor global south countries, right? But in this movie, at the end, look at that. A lot of Americans, they are leaving America, then crossing the border of Mexico, right? Then flooding into Mexico. Americans flooding into Mexico, right? Very, very interesting, that movie, The Day After. That describes the weather pattern changes. New York is flooded, right? Do you know the Arctic? What is the Arctic? The Arctic area. Where is the Arctic area? Yeah? The Arctic area. Right, there was a huge ice-capped region, right, up in the high north, where polar bears are living, right? Polar bears are living. Humans cannot live, right? But there, one of the impacts of global warming is strongly felt in the Arctic region because the ice cap is melting in the Arctic. What happens when the ice cap melts in the Arctic? When they are melting, probably they send a lot of huge volumes of water, right, to low-lying areas, right, so that these low-lying areas are flooded, including Shanghai, maybe Pakistan, Bangladesh, these countries, a lot of Southeast Asian countries, and southern area of China. They are all flooded, according to these scenarios, because of the water coming out of the Arctic melting, right? You can expect a lot of low areas are flooded by water. Another impact of the Arctic ice melting is that there's all kinds of natural resources and minerals under the Arctic ice. Under the Arctic ice. So when this ice melts, then these new finds of natural resources, including oil and gas, and all kinds of minerals, right? All kinds of minerals, you name it, right? They are all under the Arctic ice. So when the ice melts in the Arctic, there must be intense competition over the exploration and extraction of these newly found Arctic natural resources. That's second. So this is already happening. This is already happening, right? So diplomatic activities are becoming very much intense in that region already from some years ago. And even countries are moving troops to the Arctic area, like Russia, Canada, the US, Norway. They're moving troops and weapons to that region because of because to protect natural resources. Now, third, figure 11.2. Another implication of Arctic ice melting is the opening of new transportation routes. That's number three change. Opening of new transportation routes. There are two routes. There are two new routes open. One is Northwest Passage, the left-hand side. Figure 11.2, Northwest Passage. Second line, more important line, Northern Sea Route, NSR. Okay, this Northern Sea Route is much more popular, much more commercially viable than Northwest Passage. NSR, we call it NSR. NSR is much more popular, much more commercially viable, right? And NSR navigates mostly through the Russian waters. NSR navigates mostly through the Russian waters. So Russia can claim ownership of this NSR. Northwest Passage mostly claimed by Canada. Northwest Passage. So in other words, the Russian government can charge some fees to the ships navigating through NSR in the future. The importance of NSR is economics, right? You compare it to Suez Canal, compare it to Panama Canal. There is a huge shelving of distance. It'll save you a lot of money. Shipping cost saving, right? These are all made possible by Arctic ice melting. These are all possible by global warming, right? Global warming intensifies major powers conflict over Arctic natural resources and shipping routes, new shipping routes. So this is becoming a source of conflicts among major countries. Now, next page, 392. 이상화. We want to reduce the greenhouse gases, right? The carbon dioxide, methane, everything. We want to reduce greenhouse gases. But same as in the fishery case, this is a collective goods problem, right? So those who benefit and those who pay for the cost, different. There's a discrepancy here, so that it's difficult to derive cooperation, right? The author says that reducing greenhouse gases is costly. And there are two kinds of costs, right? Economic costs, political costs. Economic costs are, to reduce the greenhouse gases, you need new technology, which is extremely expensive, like developing natural gas, developing renewable energy, right? To move away from coal and oil. These are very expensive technologies, particularly for developing countries, right? These are economic costs. My question to you, what are political costs? What are political costs of reducing greenhouse gases? Political cost. That's political cost. In general, you're right. In general, you're right. 이서정. More specific. In general, he's right. 이상하 is right. But political cost, I think this author gives two kinds of examples. How the cost of reducing greenhouse gases in a domestic context, right? And the cost of reducing greenhouse gases in an international context. In other words, political costs of reducing greenhouse gases are distributional costs. Distributional costs. In other words, the cost of reducing greenhouse gases, how you distribute the costs in domestic society across different sectors, right? It's a collective goods problem because who generates, who produces these greenhouse gases most? Oil and gas companies, right? Oil and gas companies. And companies who have carbon dioxide, CO2 emitting factories. These are the culprits, right? I don't think farmers do it, right? So in domestic society, again, there are those who are culprits, right? But the cost, who should be paying for the cost, right? Farmers, I don't think they're gonna pay, right? Oil and gas companies, they have to pay, right? But these are distributional costs. As a government should distribute the cost, right? How about international distribution? Does this raise international distributional problem? Who, like for instance, in the domestic context, oil and gas companies mostly produce greenhouse gases, right? Not farmers, right? Or not other industries, right? How about internationally? International distribution problem here. In other words, who are emitting, who are responsible more for greenhouse gases? Are developed, advanced countries are more responsible, or developing countries more responsible? That's the question I'm asking, right? Who are responsible? Who are more responsible? Just common sense, probably rich countries, advanced countries who were engaged in industrial activities for a longer period of time, they are more responsible for the greenhouse gases, or for the damage done to the air. Rich countries, more responsible, right? Poor countries, their industrial activities are relatively recent, right? So historical damage, rich countries are more responsible, right? So in terms of distribution of costs, clearly here, UN or international organization, they have to step in and they have to distribute, right? Who should be paying, how much? First, diagnose the damage first, right? Diagnose the damage first, then you need to split the cost, right? Divide the cost and give a decision. You pay this much, right? You pay that much. That's distributional conflict. But again, this is a collective goods problem. collective goods problem. And like in any other issues, no world government exists. Right? There's no complying mechanism here. Right? So countries, they don't abide by rules. Right? Then let's look at how we, as an international organization, how we go about handling, managing these global warming issues, right? Setting up international organization, right? Then how did we go about distributing these costs, right? The first international organization that manages global warming was what? The first international organization that manages global warming, UNFCCC. UNFCCC is the first one created, 1992, at the Earth Summit, at the Rio Summit. As part of the Rio Summit, UNFCCC was created, tackling, right? Designed to tackle warming problem, global warming problem. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That's FCCC. Framework Convention on Climate Change. Here, the first global warming conference, the first global warming organization. Again, let's look at how UNFCCC divided the cost. How did they divide the cost? First, the goal was limit greenhouse gases to 1990 level by the year 2000. Okay, that was the goal. Okay, limit greenhouse gases to 1990 level by the year 2000, but was non-binding. It was non-binding, not mandatory. Not mandatory, voluntary. Okay, this is voluntary. And they did not assign particular target to each country. Still. More binding agreement was signed by the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol was signed in 1997. And the formula was interesting. The formula was first, rich countries, developed countries, okay, they are required to reduce emissions. It was mandatory, okay, for advanced countries. And developing countries, they are exempt from reductions. So, like I said, the way they distributed costs, Kyoto Protocol, is that they clearly state that northern rich countries are responsible for the damage. Okay, so you have to pay for the cost. But developing countries, you are okay. Okay? For the time being, you can continue to emit emissions. Okay? Until, at a certain point. To a certain point, you can continue to develop. But rich countries, there are limits. Okay, you can grow the economy, but there are limits. That's what Kyoto Protocol did. Okay, so they treated two groups of countries differently. Okay, Americans didn't like it. Here, distribution of conflicts occur. Americans didn't like it. The U.S. was opposed to it, opposed to the formula. Okay, particularly America couldn't accept the fact that China was exempt. Okay, despite the fact that China is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. The U.S. was opposed to it. So America is not a signatory to Kyoto Protocol. But Russia joined and many other developed countries joined so that Kyoto Protocol moved forward without US support until 2012, right? Then Kyoto Protocol expired. Then there was a post-Kyoto Protocol renewed, right? That's the current stage. That's the current stage. Okay. Tuesday, I'll quickly go over the rest of environmental issues like ozone depletion, biodiversity, and forest issues. And these are simple. You just skim through it. That's it. Major topic for Tuesday is energy. So major topic for Tuesday, pages 403 to the end. 403 to the end.